saving was hardwired into my brain for whatever reason, and I'm grateful for it at 7 or 8 years old. And what we have in society today is we're hardwired to spend money rather than to put it away and save it. Well, good morning, Matt.
Morning, sir.
Sometimes I laugh a little bit, and I'll be in a conversation with people, and they say, your brain's wired a little different. We're talking whether it's about raising kids or about finances or whatever, how we spend our money. And I realized, I tell the story when I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old. We lived in a little house, and we didn't have a lot of money, but my dad's, he had a dresser and a drawer on top. We called it Dad's drawer. And when he came home from work, he would change clothes into, from his office clothes into his work clothes, because he would do things after work, obviously. But anyway, he'd pull the change out of his pocket and put it in Dad's drawer. And us kids, we knew there was always a little bit of change there. And so what would a normal 7 or 8 year old do? They would, probably grab a nickel, a dime. This is back in the 60s when a nickel and a dime actually could buy you a candy bar. And then run, get somebody where there was a bicycle or a friend or something, or maybe mom to drive us to the store so we could spend our money. Well, I was a little different. This is where my brain's wired. I would take that dime, that nickel, and I would put it away. And where I put it away was in what was in the closet in the bedroom that I slept in was my parents' winter clothes. And so I put it in the pocket of my dad's winter coat. So all spring, all summer, all fall, I could gather this change. And I felt good about putting it there. And I didn't think about spending it, which again, I understand this is where the wiring's weird. Well, long story short, I got in trouble when my dad pulled his winter coat out and found all this change in his pocket and wanted to know why there was like $7 and something in change in the pocket.
Dimes and nickels.
Yeah. In dimes and nickels and maybe a quarter here and there. Well, I got in trouble. But my parents had trouble punishing me because they were like, well, yeah, you were taking money out of, right, that you weren't authorized, but you weren't spending it. You were putting away. So the idea of saving was hardwired into my brain for whatever reason. And I'm grateful for it at 7 or 8 years old. And what we have in society today is we're hardwired to spend money rather than to put it away and save it. And it's astounding to me when I see the difference in how saving and putting money away leads to so many changes as we go through life. And I tell people, okay, do you know the rule of 72? And you probably do, being a real estate investor.
Yeah, very much so.
Rule of 72 states that whatever interest you're gathering times however many years, it will equal 72. So just for example, if you're getting 8% interest, after 9 years, which is 72, your money will double. Okay, that's basically the rule of 72. If you're getting about 7%, then it'll take 10 years roughly for your money to double.
10%, roughly about 7 years.
Sure. So when I talk to people about investing early on or saving money for their children, an example I ran through the other day with a couple of clients, I said, if you put $6,000, they were talking about a vacation, $6,000 vacation, which, that's not unheard of for a family of 4 or 5. I said, if you put that $6,000 away into an investment and just forgot about it for your 12-year-old kid, how much money you think that kid would have when he's 50 years old, he or she? And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like $2.5 million. So the idea of getting away from spending and thinking about investing, if you can do it early on and get that rule of 72 to work for you. Now, unfortunately, the opposite is true with the rule of 72. So we were just talking about how interest compounds. Right. Albert Einstein said the eighth wonder of the world is compounded interest. Your money also decreases based on the rule of 72. So when we buy something of value, let's say we average 8% return. After 9 years, that money has been cut in half. Okay, so it didn't double like interest, it was cut in half. So maybe I'm not doing a great job of explaining here, but the rule of 72 works either for us or against us based on whether we're investing or whether we're consuming.
Right. And to your point, and I think I get where you're going with this. The idea is, look, if I buy something for $10,000, okay, and it's still worth $10,000, and I feel really good about that. It hasn't depreciated over the next, let's say, 9 years, right? And I could have been making 8% interest. That actually cost me twice as much, right? Because I would have had $20,000 instead of this one item that costs $10,000. So it either cost me twice as much, or I actually cut my money in half because I could have had an extra $10,000.
Bingo. And that I did this with a friend of mine. He's got a truck that he just idolizes, and it sits in his garage. He takes it out to wash it every once in a while. In 2015, so 9 years ago, in 2015, he paid about $60,000 for that truck. And I asked him the other day, I said, how's your $120,000 truck? And he said, what are you talking about? I only paid 60. I said, no, you paid 120, because if you'd taken that 60, instead of buying the truck and investing it, let's say at an average of 8%, in those 9 years, you would now have $120,000. So instead of that truck sitting in the garage that's now actually depreciated and probably worth $30,000, he would have had $120,000. So the idea of, are we getting that rule of 72 working for us or working against us? And the sooner we can get that idea put out there, whether it's in our own lives or in our kids' lives, my Lord, the difference it makes is astounding. I kept the numbers here so that I would be accurate, but let me give you specifics.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got two different people. Both of them have $20,000 and they want to buy a car. Okay, so one of them takes the $20,000, buys a $10,000 car, and invests the other $10,000. Okay, they get an average of 7% return, and they do this over 5 years. The second person takes the $20,000 and puts it as a down payment on a $60,000 car. Okay, so now they've got $60,000 car. They're making payments on $40,000. And again, we're going to keep it, apples to apples, so 7%.
Sure.
After 5 years, where are these two people?
Oh God, this is going to be a brutal one.
This is brutal. So the person that spent $10,000 on the car and invested the other $10,000, after 5 years, the money they invested, instead of $10,000, it's now $14,000 and some change. Okay. Now let's assume the car depreciated 50%. For both people.
Sure.
So instead of that $10,000 car, they've now got a $5,000 car, or a car that's worth $5,000.
Sure.
So they've got $5,000 and $14,000 and some change. So they've got $19,000 in net worth.
Sure.
After 5 years, they've gotten to drive the car. They started with $20,000. So in 5 years, they've gotten to drive the car and they're almost breaking even. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
The person that took the $20,000, used it for a down payment on a $60,000 car, has spent $47,000 on payments to make up for that $40,000. Okay. Plus the $20,000 they put down on the car. So they've spent $67,000 in that same 5 years. Now let's say it depreciated. So they bought it at the same rate.
Sure.
So they bought a $60,000 car. It's now worth $30,000. So they've got an asset that's worth $30,000 that they've spent
$67,000.
$67,000 on. So they're negative $37,000. So just in this one short 5-year period, one person's got $19,000 and some change. One's $37,000. That's $56,000 difference. Are you with me?
Listen, 100%.
Okay.
100%.
Now, but what if this person's married? Their spouse probably did the same thing. So instead of $56,000 difference in 5 years, it's $113,000. And take into account that we change cars about every 3.5 to 4 years. So we're going to do this multiple times throughout our lives. Pretty soon you realize these cars that we've got sitting in the garage, if we bought a more reasonably priced car, it could make a $500,000 to $1 million difference over, say, a 40-year period, a career. And yet when we think about it, we just look at the new car and the price and go, oh, how much does it cost us per month? And the thought that, okay, we're not going to feel it, we can afford it, this kind of thing. We don't stop and look at it and say, oh, it's going to cost me $1 million over 40 years. Are you with me?
Yeah. God.
It's astounding when we look at how we get ourselves into these situations and we don't see them going forward. You know, one of the passages in the Bible is where there's no vision, my people perish. And I talk about this in my financial talks and with my, with my community, my clients. I say, okay, let's look at how much is that $5 cup of coffee? Did you really enjoy that $5 cup of coffee that cost you $25? They're like, well, no, it only costs $5. It's Starbucks, you know. No, it costs you $25 because what you could have done. And so again, this isn't to take over your life and make you think about this constantly and be afraid to spend any money at all. But when we stop and look at how much things really cost us in terms of could we have invested that money and done something different with it? And this is where I realized I was wired different at 7 years old, because I started saving and investing. I bought my first house when I was 19 years old, and it cost me $6,000. Now, that was a down payment, of course.
Sure.
I'm not that old. Come on now. It was a down payment. It was actually a car that I traded for the down payment. But it wasn't too recent. I mean, it was a number of years ago, but I bought an apartment complex. And a friend of mine asked me, how much did that apartment complex cost you? And I said, $6,000. And he said, no way. I said, yeah, it's the same money that I bought my first house with, was $6,000. Of course, I sold the house, put it into another house, sold that, and moved forward to 30 years later, I bought a multi-million-dollar apartment complex with the same money. I hadn't put any of my own money in. And so the concept of, that Einstein said, the eighth wonder of the world is compounded interest. If you get interest working for you or you have it working against you, it's going to make a huge difference in our lives.
Right. And a couple things that come to mind as you're talking about these things. So I had a friend that I would reach out to, older friend, helped me get into college. He was a swim coach in high school, and we stayed friends for a long time. And he and his wife were awesome. And he actually officiated my wedding, and they had made money. They were the only people I really knew growing up in Concord in California, which is kind of like a lower middle class town. They were the only people I knew that you could tell they were doing something differently with money, right? And they were competent, they were fiercely capable, and they just didn't live like, you could tell they had money, but you didn't know why you could tell, because they didn't have these flashy cars. They didn't have all this stuff, but they were doing well. And so I remember talking to one of them as I was frustrated in my 20s, late 20s, just grinding through. And I was making the thing that I think people miss is I was making the right decisions, but it takes a long time for those right decisions to bear fruit. And her name was Teresa. Teresa told me, she's like, listen, this is the deal. You have to make the right decisions, and you have to keep making the right decisions over and over and over. And at some point, all of a sudden you go from just eating a crap sandwich every day and you break through, and now you're on the backside of all of these right decisions. But it takes like 15 years to do it.
Or more.
Right.
And, it is a grind. And it's really difficult with my younger clients these days to get them to understand that and get them, because they've been sold this bill of goods that, oh, go get an education and all of a sudden you're going to be the vice president of something and you're going to have, nice house, nice car, nice everything. No, it's a grind. It's going to take some time. But to put that time in and the difference it makes over our lifetime, if I try to, I kind of leave it out of my talks, but I sometimes try to explain to people what it's like to live my life at early 60s and say, not only do I not have to make any more money, but my investments, my kids don't ever have to work. Now they will, They've got work ethic. They've got a strong desire to go out there and make their own way. But that comes from my parents were poor farmers. I talk about, my parents growing up in South Dakota on the farm and to do that in one generation. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying I was blessed to have people around me early in my life that taught me the power of interest and the power of investing. I talk about I was 12 years old. I got I did it by choice. I got sent to South Dakota. Okay. My dad always talked about working and how hard it was on the farm. And I said, I want to experience it. So I went back for a summer. And boy, did I get my eyes open to what work really is. But I, of course, stayed with various relatives back there because, we're going to do Uncle so-and-so's farm. We're picking up the hay and, we would work there for 3 days and then we'd bounce over here and, we're going to do this. I got to where I really liked staying with my Uncle Bert because Uncle Bert was different. And like you just mentioned, I don't know why he was different. But I knew, I did know why he was different. I didn't know what made him different because his farm, every other farm around there, his farm was different. His farm had the straightest fences. They were all painted white. His equipment was brand new. His cars, he drove, back there, all American cars.
Sure.
And of course, this is back in the 70s. He drove a Cadillac.
Back when Cadillac had something.
That was the car.
Yeah, right.
Luckily, my Uncle Bert took kind of kindly to me and looked at this kid that was sore and had, blisters all over my hands because my hands weren't tough like the other, farm kids. Anyway, I asked him, what's the difference? And he said, well, I don't borrow money. He said, I don't owe anybody money. I only buy when I can pay for it in cash. And he also taught me, this is what brought me to my securities brokerage and running that for years was he taught me about the futures market. He said, I sell my crop on the futures market. He said, sometimes I sell it before I've even planted. And the key there was he was obviously good at it. He was planning, he was looking ahead, but that made his farm and his life and my aunt's life completely different than every other farmer in the area. Now, what did he get for it? This is a point I wanted to make. He got chastised. All the other farmers in the area were like, oh yeah, your Uncle Bert, he's a character. And in a way they would kind of chastise and put him down because he was different, because his farm was so nice. And that's one of the things you have to do. If you want to live a little different life, and this is whether you're whatever, a young person or middle age or even older, you have to be ready for some of that chastising. You have to be ready for, do you want that $60,000 car or are you willing to drive a $10,000 car? Do you want the fancy, I don't know, you name it, the fancy golf clubs, the top of the line, this and that, or are you going to do something a little bit less than that and then invest the difference?
Yeah, I can attest to being a young person. And again, I didn't grow up with a lot. Single mom, grinding through, very much so, made it through college, which I was pleased to do, and then got after it because I was really worried about not having money as an adult. And I can tell you firsthand, 22, 23, 24, working 6-7 days a week, every single week. And then when I would get any money, I would invest it right away. And my sister called me once. She said, hey, we're going up to Tahoe. We're going to be there for 3-4 days. She's about
going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah.
She's about 25, 26. She doesn't have the money because, by the way, she was getting a master's at the time. So she wasn't even working. She was just studying and spending tuition. Private school, by the way, in education. I think she taught for 2 years. That was a great investment. Anyway, so the point is, she calls me and says, hey, we're going to be up in Tahoe. Why don't you come up? And at this time I had my fiance, and we're married now. And I said, oh, I just don't have the money right now. And she said, you just bought that, $1.5 million triplex. You have money. And it froze me. Like I didn't even know how to respond. And, we get off the phone and like we all do, we rerun the argument and figure out the comeback that we should have had after the fact. But it was so clear. It's like, You realize I don't have money because I just bought this place.
Right.
Like I don't own this outright. I scrimped and saved when I finally took the last check to close on that property. It was the most horrific thing I'd ever done. I
Scares
left
you, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. I left closing. They're like, all right, there was something like I had to fund some insurance and some future property tax. They're like, just bring $10,000, this last check, whatever, and we'll close on Thursday.
Yeah.
It's Tuesday, right? And I say, okay, yeah, no problem. By the way, they had to produce multiple sets of loan documents because my hand was shaking so hard. I screwed up my signature. So
Hey, I've been there.
Attention.
I've been there.
So I sign. I'm like, yeah, no problem. It sounds great. Well, I gotta get to a couple work appointments. I leave. I'm like dialing my now wife's phone number. I'm like, Lauren, I don't think I have enough money. Like, I don't think I have the $10,000. And we instantaneously, she says, listen, go to the bank, find out what you have. Like, we'll work this out. It came down to literally, it was under $500 I had to my name when I delivered the last check. Now, mind you, the mortgage, which was due in, 32 days or something, was $12,000. I have $500 to my name. The property's vacant. It's Christmas time, right? I think I closed December 27th. So it's like, I have to get the property occupied. We move in. I got to get I literally scraped by. It was the most horrific thing ever. But a single ski trip, a single awesome, I don't know, outfit. I don't obviously shop for nice outfits, but I can imagine it could have been wiped away. And the chastising that I got from those around me, not just my family members, but my friends, because I was never available to do the really fun things. It was relentless until I was 30.
Till it turned around.
Till you broke through.
And you see it. So this concept that we're talking about being chastised, whether it was my Uncle Bert back in South Dakota, or whether it's the way you and I grew up, I understand it goes on today. My son, he'll he's 23 years old. He goes out with friends and he says, Dad, I don't dress like they do. I don't, drive cars like they do. They drive new cars. And, we've always, driven, whether we could go out and buy new cars if we want, but do you want to take that hit? Do you want to pay $60,000 and then have a $30,000 asset? The answer is no. But I told him, I said, right now you got to grind. Right now, 23 years old, you have to accept that because you have nothing to prove that the way you're living is correct.
Right. But
10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, understand what that opens up and the opportunities, that start opening up to you. When I started, I bought my first house, $6,000 down. It was a $42,000 house. I've got a 3,000 acre ranch in Oregon. It didn't just happen. It didn't.
Right.
I didn't buy that 30 years ago. Okay. Right. I didn't buy my apartment complexes back then, and I couldn't show people. And I'm sorry. I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but I want to make a point that this is the way that you live, and this is a different way of living than today's society. But the freedom it gives you, the wonderful thoughts when you don't stay up at night wondering how you're going to pay your credit card bill. You don't worry about, can I make my car payment? You don't think about, well, should I spend that money or not? Because I don't know if I have it. You have it, and then you decide whether to spend it. Right. The different ideas jump into my mind when I'm talking with you. We talk about the difference between people that are, and I don't want to say, I guess I will say, lower middle class, right, and then the main class, the middle class, and then the upper class, and how different they make their decisions. The lower middle class typically make their financial decisions. They spend their money before they earn it.
Right.
Okay, because they've got bills. They've got, they've put expenses into their lives. And so their money is spent. They're like, as soon as I get paid, I'm going to do this. As soon as I get my tax refund, I'm going to do this. Okay. The middle class, they're more earning their money and spending it at the same time. I just got paid, right, that kind of thing. The people that do the investments, the people that really have the freedom in life, they earn the money first and then to decide what to do with it. because once you've earned it, it's a whole lot easier to keep, or I should say it's a lot more difficult to spend, because you'd say, okay, I know how long it took me to do that. I know how hard I worked. I don't know that I want to spend that money right now. So when I set clients up with their goals, one of the things I recommend, and I can see it through over the last 20 years that we've done this, earn the money first and then decide what you're going to spend it on. Okay, so maybe you set a goal. Maybe you say, okay, when I get this much money, or when my business gets this busy, or whatever, when I get that new promotion, I'm going to buy a new car. After it happens, then we talk about it, and I say, do you want to buy that new car now? And a lot of times the answer is, no, I want to save the money. I want to invest the money rather than let's go spend it.
Right.
And the difference that makes in our lives, again, the rule of 72, it's going to double. If you take an average return of 8%, it's going to double every 9 years. So whatever we save today, 9 years from now, it's going to double. Another 9 years, it's going to double again. So get that power on our side, and the freedom it gives us is astounding. And I guess I don't know how to say that any different. The cars, my Lord, I'm a car guy. I've had dozens of cars. I just bought another one. I shared it with you. I bought a $132,000 car. I paid $46,000 for it. Okay, it's the most expensive car I've ever bought. And I love the person that bought it and paid the $132,000, because they had the rule of 72 working against them. This car depreciated. 6 years later, I paid $46,000 for it. Now, I'll be able to drive it for a while. And just like the example here that we had, I'll drive it, sell it for around $46,000, because the depreciation's already been taken on the car. Now, I didn't get to drive a brand new car, but it's brand new to me. It's 6 years later. It's in impeccable condition. But that $88,000 difference, it's invested rather than sitting in my garage. I think that's right. Something like that, 85,000. My mind's a little off this morning. But the point is, I've got the 85,000 that I didn't spend on a $132,000 car. I've got that invested rather than sitting in my garage. Are you with me?
Listen, 100%. It's interesting. I again, as you go through these things, there are a lot of, I didn't have good financial teaching growing up. It was just, my family was struggling as it was, and sitting down and explaining these things was not really at the top of the priority. But hearing you say these things makes me feel a lot better about the decisions I made that I was inclined to make for whatever reason. I couldn't articulate why I wasn't going to Tahoe. I couldn't articulate why all of these different things, but it's like, yeah, this is why. And this is why I'm in, again, I'm not in your position, but I'm in a position that's on the same path.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to hear.
No, I love it. One last one, wrap this up. I was at my nephew's wedding. This was 2018. And the next morning after the wedding, we're all sitting around for breakfast. And we have not a rule, but we kind of have a habit of, when we're sitting down and gathering, especially for a meal, we put our phones to the side. We put our phones down.
Sure.
And I was looking around the room, and here was my sister and my nephew and my other nephew and my brother and all these people and my brother-in-law. The nicest phone there was an iPhone 6. And this is when I don't know what it was.
You could have had a 10 or 12.
iPhone 12 or whatever was out, and they're $1,100, $1,200. The nicest phone at our table was an iPhone 6. And I just looked around and I had to smile, because we all grew up with that same collective thought process of we don't need the fancy, we don't need the glitzy, because we're going to put money into, and I looked around and I thought, okay, my brother-in-law and sister, they're worth this many millions of dollars. My nephews are both in their late 20s. They're already developing their net worths. We're not spending $1,100 or $1,200 on a phone. And I thought it was interesting, just the understanding I had. And I looked at my sister and kind of smiled, and I just wanted to tell her, I get emotional. I'm like, you're doing a hell of a job with your kids. My nephews understand the value and the they have internalized that and made those choices and accept being chastised for their choices because they don't have an iPhone 12 or 13 or whatever was the most popular, or the Samsung, whatever, Samsung 97 or whatever it is. But do we understand that the difference it's going to make in my two nephews' lives 10, 15, 20? And I just wanted to hug my sister and say, man, you taught them right. Because I know whatever they do, they're not going to have to worry about money. They're going to have that freedom to make choices, and they're going to pass it on to their kids. And that's really why I'm here, and that's why I'm spending this time with you, just to help get those thoughts out there, develop this community, this collective understanding of how we can help and how we can change our lives. You know, when we have our gatherings and we get together, and just talk about this for, you know, we do it for a couple of days, and the lives that are changed are astounding. And that's, you know, that's why we do this. That's why I'm spending time talking with you and hopefully changing some lives out there and getting some ideas.
That's beautiful. I'll tell you what, I have, my oldest is 12, but I really want him to go down the exact same road. My wife and I, again, are fortunate enough to have learned a lot of these things, and we tell them the same stuff. Because just like you, I don't want my kids to worry about money. And I'm not going to solve the problem for them, but I want them to know how to solve the problem of money for themselves.
Yeah. And you can have different problems. You choose your problems. You know, do you want to have this concern with money and being broke or being in debt or being late on a payment or all these things? And we don't make payments. We don't buy things until we can pay cash for them. And I hear all the excuses. Oh, well, I need a car that's dependable. I can't buy a used car. I don't want to buy somebody else's problem. It's like, I bought dozens of cars. I don't, maybe I've had some issues and this and that, but sure. The freedom it's given me to invest other money rather than having to buy new. Oh, I want a warranty. Okay, you're paying for that warranty when you buy the new car, and you're losing it because the car's losing. Cars lose about 50% of their value every 3 years.
Right.
Okay. So if you want to buy a $100,000 car, wait 3 years, you can pay 50 for it. 50,000. Wait 3 more years, you can pay about $25,000 or $30,000 for a car that cost $100 new. Okay. I like expensive cars. It's one of my, whatever.
Sure.
One of my weaknesses.
I don't know if it's a weakness if you're buying the 130 for 40 and you're paying cash.
Well, there you go. So yeah, I'm not going to buy a car and drive it off the lot and lose that chunk of money right away. I'll buy a 3-year-old car. I'll buy a 4 or 5-year-old car. It's brand new to me. Very dependable. If it's not dependable, I have a great mechanic. I'd rather pay that mechanic than just watch my money go up in dust, vaporize.
I've never thought of that. That's a good way.
Well, Matt, again, it's the difference it makes in our lives and the difference we can make in the next generation's life. My dad grew up he was a poor farmer. And I asked him, I said, Dad, why didn't you keep farming? Why didn't you stay on the farm in South Dakota? And he got, pretty emotional. It makes me a little emotional. He said, I didn't want you to work as hard as I did. He said, as hard as I worked every single day on the farm, I don't want you to work that hard one day in your life. And he made the changes and the sacrifice my mom and dad did so that we can have these changes. And that's one of the things that I put out to parents all the time is, listen, let's make these changes in our lives. Let's discipline ourselves so that we can make the next generation that much better, that much more prosperous, and help them make better decisions. And that's really what we're about. Thanks for being around.
Appreciate you.